Inshallah, Surah Lahab, or also known as Surah Al-Masadd. So we begin with actually a recitation of the surah, which is A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Tabbat yada abi lahabin wa tab, ma aghna anhu maluhu wa ma kasab, sayasla naran zata lahab, wamratuhu hammalatal hatab, fi jidiha hablum min masad. The translation of the surah is as follows. Perish the hands of the father of flame, or Abu Lahab, perish he. No profit to him from all his wealth and all his gains. Burned soon will be he in a fire of blazing flame. His wife shall carry the wood as fuel, a twisted rope of palm leaf fiber round her neck. Now, the surah itself, Surah Lahab, it's actually the 111th surah in the Quran. It's the fourth last surah in the Quran as well. In terms of the surah itself, it's a Meccan surah. It was revealed in Mecca to the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The surah itself, the historical background as to why it was revealed, is actually related to Abu Lahab. And so basically, it's very important that we first understand who Abu Lahab was before we actually get into the surah and what's been revealed in the surah. So Abu Lahab, first the meaning of the name itself, Abu Lahab means father of the flame. Um, he was actually, his original name, or his real name was Abdul Uzza. Now Uzza was an idol or a god or false god in Mecca. Lat and Uzza, they were two main gods that were in the Kaaba that the Meccans used to worship, or the Mushrikeen used to worship. So his name, his original name is Abdul Uzza. Um, he was called Abu Lahab because it was actually used in a positive way, because he was very fair skinned, and his cheeks were red because of that. And so Lahab is actually a fire or a flame, or fire, or it's a fire that has red flame in it. So that's why they used to call him Abu Lahab. So that was his kunya, Abu Lahab, but it was used more in a positive connotation. Um, he was actually the most famous person in Makkah. Like people, because in those days, even people used to come for pilgrimage to Makkah, and he was considered. He was one of the chiefs of the Quraysh, and he was also very influential. He not only was he very wealthy, but he was also beautiful and handsome, and that's why he had this status in Makkah. He was also from the Hashmi clan of the Quraysh. And the other thing was that he was actually the grandson of Hashim. And on the other thing was his wife as well. His wife, her real name actually is Arwa, but her kunya is Jamil, which means the mother of the beautiful. So she was also beautiful, and she was actually the granddaughter of Umayyah, which was another, between the in the Quraysh there were two main tribes, Hashmi and the Umayyads. So she was from that side, and she was also very beautiful, and very in status. She was also one of the top ladies in Mecca, and this couple was considered as one of the, they were more like celebrities in Mecca, the most influential couple in Mecca, and people used to look up to them and give their examples. So as a family, or as a couple, they were pretty strong and influential in Mecca. Now he's actually, the way he's related to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is he's actually the Prophet's uncle. So he's actually the brother of Abdullah radhiyallahu anhu, or the father of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he's the son of Abdul Muttalib. So um, he, not only being an uncle of the Prophet, he was also a neighbor of the Prophet. So he used to live right next to the Prophet in Mecca. Now, when the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was born, Abu Lahab was actually one of the first ones to celebrate on his birth. And the way he did that was because Abdullah, may Allah be pleased with him, the Prophet's father passed away before the Prophet was born, and so Bibi Amna, or the mother of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, she was expecting him, and as in Arabic, even in our culture as well, or in the other parts of the world as well, having a son is considered really an honor, So when the slave girl of Abu Lahab, um, who basically accepted Islam as well, and she's known as Sobia Ritalanha, or in Arabic Sawaba. When she came and gave the news of the Prophet being born to Abu Lahab, he was so happy that with the indication of his finger, he said, you're free to go, and he freed her, as a celebration that the Prophet was born. And so he also loved the Prophet, like as when he was growing up, and he was also, because this was like his brother's son, and as a his nephew, so he was very, he loved him from that perspective as well. And the Prophet himself was also as a child as well. He's a very good child. He was one of the best children anyone could have. So he was really loved the Prophet as well from as a child. Now, as time progressed, um, he basically grew in influence as well, Abu Lahab, because um, the chiefs of Makkah, they passed away gradually, and then as time progresses, as a period of time, he grew in rank and stature as well in Makkah. Um, Now he loved the Prophet so much that when the Prophet, there's an indication with the fact that he had his two sons, Utbah and Utaba, married to the Prophet's daughters as well. And also he married his. There are some narrations in which he married his own daughter Dura to the Prophet's adopted son, Zaid bin Haritha radhiyallahu anhu. So he was so close. He loved the Prophet so much that he actually gave his own sons and daughters in marriage to the Prophet's daughters and sons. Now, now the thing that we need to understand is this is actually background before the Prophet actually declared his prophethood, or declared his, or brought the people towards Islam, um, or invited the people towards Islam. Um, as soon as he did that, that's when he started opposing the Prophet immediately. And when you look at his opposition to the Prophet, it's totally 180 degrees to the other side. And it's very hard to imagine how a person that loved the Prophet so much before his, declaration of a prophethood, right after that he's just turned around. When you look at like other people, like the Prophet's other uncles, like Abbas radiallahu anhu, or even like Abu Talib radiallahu anhu, like these people, they even after the Prophet declared his prophethood, they would still, they were still loving him, still caring about him, although they disagreed with him, but they still cared for him. But this person, he totally turned away. Um, and that, when we're going to get into a discussion later as to why he did that and what were the reasons, and were there really the reasons that he feel threatened as a leader, or were the reasons that because the Prophet ﷺ was saying that the gods that you're worshipping are not right. We'll get into the discussion later on, but right now I just wanted to give this background as to, so that you can have this in mind, who Abu Lahab was. Um, now, now if you get into when the Prophet actually declared his prophethood, there were two incidences that caused this surah to be revealed. The first one was, and this is very famous, everyone of you would know it, is the Prophet ﷺ one morning got up and he climbed Mount Safa. He went up to the top and said, Ya Sabaha, basically in those days when you need to make an announcement of like an emergency situation or something that's going to be said that's important, that's what the people used to do. They used to get up to the mount, and then they used to call out everyone of the city. Now the other thing they used to do was, they used to also take off their clothes and then shout, so that if someone can see and cannot hear, they would still come, or if some people hear, they do come as well. But the Prophet, being the Prophet of Allah, he didn't take off his clothes. He kept his clothes on, but then he went to the top of the mountain and he said, he called the people. And so the people came to him, and then he said, you all know that narration where he said, if I tell you that there's an enemy coming right after behind this mountain, would you accept me or not? And they said, yes, you're truthful. You always say the truth, and therefore we will accept him. So then he basically, in conclusion, he said, I'm telling you, tell them about the day of judgment and the Qiyamah and then what's going to come, and you should accept Islam as your religion, accept Allah as one God, don't worship anyone else. At that point, it was actually Abu Lahab who was the first one to say, um, Tabbalak, which means, may you be destroyed, Nazubillah. And he was the first one to say that to his nephew over there, and then everyone else, the chiefs, everyone, they went away. Um, that was the first incident where he actually, cursed the Prophet, Nazubillah. And then the next one was where basically the Prophet ﷺ invited everyone uh, for a dinner at his place to give them dawah for the deen. Everyone came, including Abu Lahab. But then, when he was about to give them dawah after the dinner, they started making noise, and Abu Lahab created that such a he created such a fuss that everyone went away. And then again he called them, you know, he again called them up and said, come for dinner again. And they came again, and so he had this session where he invited them. Now finally, Abu Lahab said, okay, let's listen to what he has to say. So they listened, and then Abu Lahab said, okay, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, if I was to accept this religion of yours, what benefit will it give me? So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, the benefit you'll get is, of course, you be successful in the hereafter. You will be in Jannah. Allah will accept you. What else do you need? Allah will be pleased from you. So he said, well, then what's different between me and these people here? Because remember, this person considered himself to be, higher in stature and rank from everyone else. So he said, what's different if these people also accept Islam and I accept Islam, and we are all on the same level? What's different? The Prophet said, isn't it sufficient that Allah is pleased from you? And so he went away, and he said, Tabba deen haza, like this deen itself, is destroyed. Nauzubillah. He said that. So these were two incidents where he said that. And it also gives you an indication that actually Abu Lahab's intentions weren't really for his own deen or his own way of life. It was actually because he was strong in power and stature, and he felt threatened from Islam, that Islam would actually diminish all of that and put him at equals with everyone else, like the slave and the king, they're equal. So then that was what he felt threatened with, and he was never willing to sacrifice that, even at the cost of uh, being against his own nephew, the one he used to love so much. So basically, when he did this, said those two kalimas, that first was tabalak, and then the other one was tabat hazadin. That's when the surah was revealed, or say, basically, if you go to the first verse, which is tabatida abi lahabin, right? So that is it is a response to Abu Lahab's own words, what he was saying, that he be destroyed. Now, if you look at tabbat, the word tabbat itself, um, it means destruction, but it means a slow destruction. Because the word halak, halak, is the one that is used for immediate destruction, that immediately being destroyed. Someone is hit by a car, a bullet, you're saying they halak, that's immediate. But tabbat is something that is slow. It's like being destroyed slowly. And why is it considered worse than being halak? Because um, when something destroys slowly, it's a more painful process. It's extended over a period of time. So that's why Allah used the same word, saying tabba jada, because Abu Lahab was such an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ, that Allah, said in the Quran that he should be destroyed slowly. So that's why he used this word as opposed to halak. Now, why was Abu Lahab, or why, if you look at it from that perspective, Rasulullah ﷺ had a lot of other enemies as well. There was Abu Jahl, there was Utaba, there were Walid bin Ibn Mughira, there were lots of chiefs in Mecca who were the enemy of the Prophet ﷺ. But why Allah only chose Abu Lahab and reveal a whole surah around him is what we need to understand. Because if you look at Abu Lahab and the things he's done, none of the other enemies did that. Now the first thing is, he was actually the first one to, as I mentioned, he was behind the everyone else in Mecca to actually move this or start this movement of being Rasulullah's enemies, right? He was the first one who gathered everyone together and said, we should stop this person, we should stop this deen, because it's going to threaten us. Otherwise, people over there were just ignoring the Prophet. You had people who were accepting Islam, and there were others that were ignoring him, but no one was really oppressing him. He was the first one who started to oppress him. and he also encouraged other people to oppress him. So that is the first thing he did. The other thing was that when the prophet's son passed away, Hazrat Abdullah radhiyallahu anhu, or in some narrations Qasim radhiyallahu anhu, when he passed away as a child, and we discussed this in Surah Qasr over here. um, Abu Lahab was the first one to celebrate that he's and if you look at that from a humanity perspective as well, uh, even anyone who has the staunchest enemy, he would never celebrate on their child passing away, because it's humanly, no matter how hard your heart is, you can never imagine that. But this person, being the uncle of the prophet, he actually celebrated on that, and he said that Nauzubillah, Nabi Pak Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is now abtar, which means, of course, being cut off. So this if you look at his mindset, or you look at this person itself, it's even worse than an anime as well. That the way he's reacting to all of this. And then the other thing he used to do was, because he was a neighbor of the prophet, so what he used to do was, he used to throw garbage into the prophet's house, because they share the same wall, right? So he used to throw garbage into the prophet's house as well. The other thing is, when Prophet ﷺ was praying in Kaaba, he came and he put the intestines of a camel on top of him when he was in sajda. So he was always, around the Prophet, oppressing him. Even when they used to have the Hajj season in those days, when people used to come and worship the idols and do all of those things, he used to Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam used to actually go around and do the dawah. He used to invite people to Islam, and a lot of people were starting to convert to Islam. But he used to go behind the Prophet ﷺ, and if the Prophet was preaching to someone, he would come in and say, "Nazubillah, he's a liar," and and all those things against him, and his own uncle, and he was doing this. So the Prophet also felt, depressed, because this person was his uncle, and he was doing such things, and he wasn't even, and the extent of his, and also if you look at even the extent of how he, because and remember I told you in the beginning that he had married his two sons to the Prophet's two daughters, and his own daughter as well in some narrations to the Prophet's son, adopted son. What he did was, he immediately told his sons to divorce the Prophet's daughters. He was, to such an extent he was against the Prophet, that he said, divorce them, and he even brought his own daughter back from her home, just because of this. That he was willing to even destroy his own children's homes because of this. And what he did was, his son actually, Utaba. So basically, the way they were married was, the Prophet's two daughters, Ruqayya and Kulthum. So Ruqayya was married to Utba, and Utaba was married to Kulthum. So when they divorced, when he asked them to divorce them, they did divorce the two of them. And Utaba, what he did was, in addition to that, he came up to the Prophet ﷺ, and he spat in front of him and said, "I don't want your daughter, you keep her," and came back. The Prophet ﷺ was so hurt that, if you look at Prophet's life, he's never ever cursed someone. The Prophet was so Rahim, his personality was so Kareem, like he never ever cursed anyone. But on this occasion, he said, "Oh Allah, send a dog of yours on Utaba." And what happened was, Utaba was told by someone that the Prophet ﷺ has made this dua against you, so beware. Now he knew inside that this person is a truthful person, and deep inside he knew that this was he has something. So he was so worried that he used to then start from that day onwards. He used to start going around with guards, and with protective dogs and animals to protect him from anything. So on one of his trips to Sham, he was a trader as well. He was there and he was sleeping in the night, when a lion came, and he went across the animals, and he basically ate him alive. So that's how, and then Abu Lahab realized that the dua was made but even then he didn't accept Islam. He kept on with, and he increased his aggression against the Prophet ﷺ. So the also um, the so, sorry the other thing I wanted to point out was that because of this, all of these things that I point out, the steps he took and the things he said, he became a symbol of the worst kind of, um, you know, uh, the worst kind of animosity, or being the worst kind of enemy of the Prophet ﷺ. And because of the, if you look at the other examples, like even if you look at Abu Jahl, you know, what did Abu Jahl do? He did come out to in the battle of Badr to fight. Okay, but this person, Abu Lahab, didn't even come in Badr. He was afraid. He was such a coward that he didn't come out to fight the Prophet ﷺ. What he did was he sent someone else, but he didn't come himself. And that shows that he, in reality, he was not even sincere with his own religion. What the case was that he was more concerned about his stature, his worldly life, and what he enjoyed in Makkah. And as a result of that, he didn't come out. Uh, so if you go back to the surah itself, you now realize why Allah is saying that perish the hands of the father of the flame. Parashi, Abu Lahab. Now Allah, the beauty of this is Allah actually has turned around a positive connotation into a negative one. So what Allah has done is Abu Lahab. If you look at the words of Quran, Abu Lahab was used in a positive sense, but when Allah is using it, it becomes negative because He's referring to him as being perished, as being finished. So Abu Lahab, the father of flames, basically is from more from a perspective of the father of nar or fire or Jahannam. So from that perspective, Allah is saying, perish the hands of. Now, why were the hands referred here? That again is the Mufassirin have said there are a number of reasons, because his hands were all the source of the animosity against the Prophet ﷺ. His hands, hands are used to also as a strength, as a power. All the work that we do, it's his hand, behind it. He's doing it, so it's used from that sense that his hands are cut off. So when this was said, actually, and it was revealed, Abu Lahab came up to the Prophet ﷺ and even to other people and said, "Look at my hands; they're still fine." And he said, "Nauzubillah," again, that the Prophet ﷺ was not right because his hands are okay, and so now nothing's happened to him. I don't see anything, and you're saying this is going to happen to me. So, um, but then when the actual was more from a symbolic perspective, that when if you look at the next one, this next work, it says, "No profit to him from all his wealth and all his gains." So all the gains that he had, like being the richest person in Makkah, having land, property, all of that, and status as well. The other thing is kasab. The word is used as kasab, which is it also includes children. So he had sons as well, and saying no profit to him from all his wealth and all his gains. If you look at the way this person died, so right after the battle of Badr, when the Mushrikeen were defeated, they came back, and Abu Sufyan actually gave the news to Abu Lahab that Abu Jahl is dead and all of the other chiefs are dead. We've lost a lot of men and we've been defeated and we've come back. He was so depressed. His state was so, he was in such pain, like no one else was in such pain in Mecca. Even the people that had fought on the battlefield, they were not in much as he was. Everyone could see the pain on his face. And what he did was that he sat down in such a grief-stricken situation that, and then, so if you take a step back, Abbas Radiallahu anhu, who was also the Prophet's uncle, he hadn't accepted Islam at that point. He only accepted Islam after Badr. His wife had accepted Islam in Makkah already. So although Abbas radiallahu anhu hadn't accepted Islam, but his wife, al-Fadl, or also known as Lubaba radiallahu anha, she had accepted Islam, but she was living with Abbas radiallahu anhu. So they had a slave. His name was Abu Rafi radiallahu anhu. He had also accepted Islam. So both the slave and the and Fadl radiallahu anhu had accepted Islam, and they were he had a slave. So Abbas radiallahu anhu was not around when this news came back that Badr, they had lost in Badr. So basically, when Abu Rafi radiallahu anhu heard this news, he was sitting there as well, and he became happy, and he was so happy that in his happiness he expressed some words which Abu Lahab heard, and he got so angry that he started beating him up, and he was beating him up, and he was taking out his own anger on Abu Rafi radiallahu anhu. That's when Fadl radiallahu anha, what she did was she grabbed the pole of the tent and she whacked it on Abu Lahab's head, and said, if Abbas radiallahu anhu was here, you would have never been able to touch him, because of course he was Abbas radiallahu anhu's slave, right? But actually he was freed as well at the time, but he was still with them. So then Abu Lahab started bleeding as well from his head, and he was taken back, and everyone else stepped in. The chief stepped in, and they stopped them, and said, "Okay, fine, let's resolve this and all." So right after that, what happened was, on the very next day, he started developing a sickness, which was more like, um, it was more like initially people thought that he had like measles or something on his body, and then as time grew by, he actually developed what people thought was plague or taun, what you call. They thought his body was melting, and they were like, what's going on? What's wrong with him? So people started distancing themselves from him. Even his own children, his wife, they stayed away from him, because they were like, maybe this is contagious. This might transfer to us. And then within 7 days of that, he died. So when he died, actually, no one was willing to bury him as well, because they didn't want to go close to him, and they left his body in his own house, and no one went by until like a neighbor came up to his sons and said, we all might get sick. You need to bury this person. So what they did was they took long logs of trees, and they pushed his body into a ditch, and they put rocks over it, because they couldn't really get mud. So what they did was just the rocks, and so no one really did a formal funeral for him, or there was nothing like that. They wanted to just get rid of his body. So this was basically the end of Abu Lahab, and that's why none of when Allah says in the Quran that no profit to him from all his wealth and all his gains. If you look at this, he had so much wealth. He was the best in status in Makkah amongst the chiefs from a worldly perspective, but still nothing of that could help him. Even his own children couldn't come and help him with that, with what he was suffering. So this is again a prophecy of the Quran, and it's an indication of the Quran being the word of Allah, that this was fulfilled. So this surah was actually revealed in the life of Abu Lahab, and he had so much years, he had so much time, and this happened afterwards. So it is again an indication of the Quran being the word of Allah, and being haq. Now let's come to the other person, because in this surah there the two people mentioned, Abu Lahab and his wife. So I mentioned earlier the wife's name being the nickname being Jamil, and Arwa being her real name. She was also again a very staunch enemy of the Prophet. So although being a woman, being a lady, and considering herself to be a noble lady in the society, the thing she did was, there was nothing, no comparison. She was the one that used to actually put in thorns, like she would bring thorns and put them in front of the Prophet Prophet's house. She would also, her tongue, the way she used to speak words was very vulgar, and when she used to abuse the Prophet as well. So in fact, one time when this surah was revealed, and if you go back to the verses that relate to her, it says, his wife shall carry the wood as fuel, a twisted rope of palm leaf fiber around her own neck. She was also a poetess. She used to also do poetry. So when she was told that this surah has been revealed and you've been addressed as follows, she came in search of the Prophet ﷺ. And she came, and at that right moment, the Prophet ﷺ was sitting with Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said, Ya Rasulullah, I see Jamil coming towards us. So you better move behind me, so that if she says anything. And she also had a rock in her hand. So Abu Bakr was worried that she might come and hurt the Prophet ﷺ. So he wanted to protect the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ said, don't worry, Abu Bakr, she won't be able to do anything to me. When she came, she didn't even look at the Prophet ﷺ. She looked at Abu Bakr Siddiq and said, where is Muhammad ﷺ? So he stayed quiet, and she goes, did your sahib, or basically your friend, or your companion, did he say these words? He said yes. And do you agree with this? He said yes, I do. And so she actually recited another poem of hers. It's a long poem basically, and it was all around cursing the Prophet ﷺ. So then she went away. And Abu Bakr Siddiq was expecting that she would actually throw the rock or do something, but she didn't even look at the Prophet ﷺ. And so he turned back to the Prophet ﷺ and said, Ya Rasulullah, she didn't even look at you and she didn't even, say anything to you. And Rasulullah ﷺ said that, when she was coming, an angel appeared which stood in front of her and me and between us. And that's why she was not able to look at me. And my Allah protected me from her. So basically, that was the extent of her offense as well. She was very offensive against the Prophet as well, and that's why Allah has also addressed her in this surah. In fact, she was also one of the ones that had actually encouraged her sons to divorce the Prophet's daughters. Um, the divorce of that's basically before, because that all of this happened before. The extent of their anger and offense against the Prophet was all before, and then that's why this was revealed. So then basically she also, what the other thing she was to do, and that's why you get this verse is basically the third verse of the surah, which talks about well, oh, sorry, actually the third one is burn soon will he be in a fire of blazing flame. The fourth one is his wife shall carry the cracking wood as fuel, and the last one is a twisted rope of palm leaf fiber around her own neck. So what she used to do was she used to wear a very expensive necklace. It was like one of the most expensive necklaces in Makkah that anyone could wear. She was wearing that necklace, and she used to grab the necklace and say, by Lat and Uzza, their false gods. She used to say, by them, I swear by them that I will spend this necklace against the Prophet ﷺ. So she used to say that all the time whenever she used to see the Prophet ﷺ. Again, if you look at this verse, which talks about um, a twisted rope of palm fiber around her own neck, that is an indication of her necklace, the way that she's now all dressed up, and she, in this world, she's got this necklace which she grabs as a show of power, and being arrogant. That same necklace was going to be turned into a rope in the next life, where it's going to be around her own neck. Now if you look at the um, you know, you know the word itself which we use is wamratuhu, or imra. Imra is used for a wife, and they were together in this life, Abu Lahab and his wife, and they're going to be together in the hell as well. That's what Allah is basically telling in this surah, and Allah has basically said it is done, because for Allah this is something that is soon. For us it might be a long time when Qiyamah happens and all that, but for Allah there's no time and no space. So for him it's just he said it and it's done. That's why when you look at the verse itself, the words used indicate that it's going to be soon, which is actually soon is true in this sense as well from our perspective, that both of them died soon after this. But then the other thing is, in Qiyamah, for Allah it's still no time. For him it doesn't matter. There's nothing from that time period purposes. Now hamma latal hatab, the word hamma, it's from hamila, like being a carrier. So the the interesting thing about this is that hammalat al-hatab was actually used to refer to slave girls in those days that used to go around and carry wood, firewood. They used to pick up firewood and they used to take that and burn it for fuel purposes, for cooking purposes, or in the winters for heating purposes. So they used to be called hammalat al-hatab. Now here Allah is using the same word for Jamil, that she is actually the one that's Hammalat al-Hatab. Now the Mufassirin have said two things here. The first is, she in her life in the world, she used to actually do that. She used to carry some woods and bring them, because not only was she rich, but she was also bakhil. She used to do bukhil, and she was very selfish, and she wasn't willing to share her money with the poor, and did not do charity, and she used to save money as well. So she was the sort of person that used to carry that. The other interpretation is that if you go back to this the very start of the surah. Sorry, at the end of the surah, where it is, his wife shall carry the wood as fuel. So what's going to happen is ultimately in Jahannam, um, Abu Lahab will burn, and both the couple will burn. But how will the fire be fueled? It's going to be fueled by wood that's going to be brought by Jamil. So there's going to be a non-stop azab on these two, where and they're going to be fueling their own azab. So the wife is going to bring the wood, and they're going to put it in the fire, and the fire is going to burn both of them. And then she'll go back again, she'll bring the wood again, and then she's going to burn the both of them again. So it's going to be a never-ending process. And then around that is going to be a twisted rope of palm fiber. Now, palm fiber, if you look at date trees, and they have the leaves they have, that is actually taken and twisted into a rope that's made out. The Arabs use that rope a lot for. It's a very strong rope. So that rope is going to be wrapped around her neck, in Jahannam, and it's going to be the one where she brings the wood, and the rope is hanging around her neck and pulling her as well. So the source of because she when used to grab at the necklace, it used to pull against her neck, but she used to enjoy that, as a demonstration of power and all that, because she thought she was in control, and she can let go at it whenever she wants to. But then when what's going to happen in Jahannam is where it's going to be grabbed around her neck, and she cannot escape that. So basically, in conclusion, um, and the other thing, sorry, is Allah also uses the word lahab, like, um, because it's I say lahab means red flame, and also the one that they're going to burn in is going to be red as well. So Abu Lahab is a father. In the world they used to refer to him because he was handsome, and that's why they used to call him Abu Lahab. But in the Jahannam, he's being referring to Abu Lahab as well, because it's going to be because Abu is used not only as in the sense of being a father, like a real father, but it's also used if you're something like Abu Bakr, like Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, because he used to have with him goats, so he used to call him from that. Like Abu Huraira, he used to have a cat, so they used to call him Abu Huraira. So it's used from that context. Necessarily, they're not the father of the goat or the father of the. It's more because you're with that person. Or like Nabi Pak Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to Ali radiallahu anhu when he was once lying down in sand, Abu Turab. So those are kunyas that are given from being like close to something. So over here, Abu Lahab was given that kunya because he's going to be part of that fire. He's going to become one with the fire. He's going to be so close to the fire that he's now known as Abu Lahab. So basically, to end, um, the one last thing I want to point out was Hammalat al-Hatab is also used for gossiping. So, and she had this, trait in her that she used to go around gossiping, like listening one thing from here, telling it to someone else over there, and she had that habit, which was a really bad habit. And so that's why again she's known as Hammalat al-Hatab. Now, in conclusion, there are three prophecies in this surah that basically were fulfilled, and that's enough, knowledge. Sorry, not enough evidence for anyone who has a bit of knowledge of history, because these are proven by history as well. So the three prophecies in this surah alone that were fulfilled, that give an indication of the Quran being the word of Allah, and it's enough proof to accept Islam as being the only deen and the right deen. The first is Abu Lahab being killed. So in this surah, the indication is clear. No matter how you read the surah, how you interpret it, it is that Abu Lahab will be destroyed, and that happened, right? So there's no refuting that, because this surah was revealed in Makkah, as I pointed out, and when this was revealed, after a few years, the Prophet migrated or did hijrah to Medina, and then the first year the Battle of Badr happened, and after that Abu Lahab died. So he had a few years, but ultimately he was destroyed, and his death is, no matter which source you look at, his death was also very painful. So he died. The other is no benefit to him of his wealth and kasab. So he couldn't use his money to actually get rid of what happened to him, nor his children came to his help. Even he couldn't be buried properly. So all of this is proven. So again, what the Quran is saying, that his money, his wealth will not benefit him, and that didn't happen. even being one of the chiefs of the Quraysh. They couldn't, even the other chiefs couldn't honor him, so he wasn't given that proper honor when he died and all that. Even people actually distanced themselves from him. And the last one was that he will remain in hell. Now that's of course something that if you're a Muslim, then you believe that that's going to happen. But the fact that you've believed on the first two things, this one also proves that it's going to happen ultimately. So basically, this surah is about Abu Lahab. But as us, what is the message for us? And the message for us is, of course, um, it gives us an indication of Allah's love for His Messenger. That's the first message. Because this person, why didn't Allah reveal a surah on Abu Jahl or someone else? Because these people, they were not that to that extent an enemy of the Prophet. Some of these were enemy because of they believing in their own religion. There were also some kuffar mushrikeen. They were not the enemy of the Prophet. They ignored him. And there were some that were helpful to the Prophet. There are lots of examples of mushrikeen who were actually, supportive of Muslims, in the sense they used to take care of them and help them as well. So uh, Allah only used Abu Lahab to give this example, as he is actually the worst form. He is the one who's given my messenger so much trouble, and he's done so much bad to my messenger, or my beloved messenger, that Allah has revealed the whole surah cursing him and his wife as well. So that's the first indication that we should get the extent of the love Allah has for his messenger. The other thing is, and this is more from our perspective, that you are actually, if someone basically abuses, curses, or goes does something bad to you, like as a person, to myself, then I should do sabr on that. Because if you look at the Prophet's life, he didn't react to that, right? He left it to Allah. He was all the time doing dawah. He did sabr on that, and that's what we should be doing as well. We shouldn't being, if someone tells us something, say something, instance, we react and we do something else. No, you accept it and you carry on with what Allah has told you to do, and what's the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that's the other message that we get from this. And the third thing is, of course, if someone is, and this is more around blasphemy, or the concept of being disrespectful to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if someone is disrespectful to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what do you do in that sense, right? You are, of course, to oppose them. Now how you oppose them, that you need to be, of course, in line with the Prophet's teachings. You cannot go out and start destroying property and doing things that are not in line with the Sharia. So you need to do something that is basically more practical or more proactive. Like if you look at this itself, or if you look at in the Prophet's life, if someone used to come and be disrespectful to the Prophet, uh, how the Sahaba used to react. Like if there's one example where um, uh, there was there was a poet, and I forget his name. He came up and he said some verses that were disrespectful to the Prophet. So what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did was, he said to Hassan bin Sabir radhiyallahu anhu to get up and recite some poetry in his praise. So he got up and he recited that, which was far better, and so that's the way you should react to anything. If someone disrespects your Prophet, you say something that is more respectful, that is more in his honor, and you react with that, because it's more of a battle of words now, as opposed to killing people and going around with that. So that's what we need to understand from this surah itself as well. Um, that in conclusion, I would say again, the way the surah fits in. If you look at the format of the Quran and the way it is, right after the surah is Surah Ikhlas, and before this was Surah Nasr. In Surah Nasr, Allah Ta'ala basically said, promised the victory to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So he was given this good news, and then in this surah, basically his worst enemy had been told to be destroyed. So the Prophet basically has been told, and even the Muslims have been told, that your worst enemy, even he will be destroyed. So everyone else, you know, what's going to happen to everyone else as well? They are going to be destroyed, of course, as well. So even the worst one, has gone away. And then Surah Ikhlas basically is around the unity of God, and that's basically the essence of Islam. So after all of this, what's going to remain now is the unity of God, and that's why the Muslims need to come back to that. So I conclude with that, and if you have any questions, then we can take them up.